It's your boy Agent Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew -1, unfortunately. Anthony couldn't make it today, but we have the fabulous Alpha Dean and myself. And Dean, why we're here today?
Well, before we get into why we're here, we do want to send a heartfelt shout out to Anthony. Happy birthday today. Um, Sorry you couldn't be here. To the rest of the world out there, our viewers who are interested in Anthony's just kind of exhausted. It's been a harrowing week with COVID-19, coronavirus, whatever you want to call it. So and it's basically been taking a toll on all of us. But you are our viewers, our fans, whatever you want to call yourselves, the Cypher Unlimited community. We didn't want to leave you hanging with nothing. So here we are. And what we're here to talk today about is basically customizing or adapting a setting inspired by something else, something that is big or huge to us. You know, um, I'm not going to give away Al's name because it was pretty awesome. I think it's great. I want him to tell you the name of his inspirational setting that he's working on. But I just put out a supplement called the Umber Earth, a horror mixtape, and I'm going to talk about that, what inspired it, and what it all entails. So, Al, give him that awesome name, and let's jump right in.
Alright, so the thing I'm working on, I've decided to call Obscured Oubliettes. And it's, again, it's a video game inspired setting. And it's based off or inspired by Darkest Dungeons. If you ever played that game, it's a dungeon crawling game with a ton of resource management aspects. You take your little heroes into the dungeons to gather materials. They get battered and beaten in the dungeon, very stressed out, and you have to bring them back to town with their, hopefully, with their lives intact, and with hopefully also, the resources that you need to upgrade your town. And
Let me interrupt you for a minute, Al. You did say something wonderful, stressed out. Um, let's talk about stress because I know you've done some really cool things with the idea of stress. You've kind of added a new pool for people, but it's not necessarily one that you manage, but it is one that you kind of have to be aware of, right?
yes, all right. So you do manage in a way. So again, it's just a stress pool. It's how stressed your character gets from going through life, or in this case, going through the dungeon. And a lot of things can set off stress, like whether you see your party member get a brutal attack hit on them, or maybe you set off a trap. Maybe you saw something very disturbing in some text that you found in the dungeon. But there's a lot of factors that go into what stresses a character out. But basically, you acquire stress, and it's a numerical thing that you earn, 5, 2 stress, whatever the situation calls for, as deemed by the GM. And once you hit a certain threshold, your character has to make what's called a resolve roll, and that's the thing just straight from Darkest Dungeon. I'm very inspired by it. And what you do is you make a roll, and if your character's very hardy, you pass the resolve roll. You overcome your stress, and you become, um, I forget the word that they use for it, but you get a buff. You get courageous, stalwart, whatever. You get some really cool buff, and if you fail the roll, you get a very negative buff, or I believe they're either way. I forget what they're called. But you get a very negative trait where you might become cowardly or selfish or any number of things. I've created actually little tables here in my notebook, this is the notebook I'm using for Darkest Dungeon. If you want to take a quick look. It's awesome. Love the eyes. Feel like it fits the aesthetic pretty well. Also got some art in there by my husband, Plague Doctor, from Darkest Dungeons. Very cool. But yeah, I created a few tables in here for that sort of stuff. Um, Afflictions. So examples of afflictions. So you go through you get very stressed out. You make a resolve roll, right, and you fail it. You could become, uh, like fearful, selfish, masochistic, paranoid,
So, so,
irrational.
so, what you could actually do or say is that becomes an additional descriptor.
Essentially, yes. What I'm aiming for is to have. I'm gonna have to design a character sheet for this, because you'll have afflictions aplenty. It's basically afflictions are basically a temporary descriptor you get until you leave the dungeon. As soon as you leave the dungeon, all afflictions, positive or negative, go away. It's basically how you flavor it, or how it would be in the setting is your adrenaline is pumping so hard during the encounter after you're stressed out, that you keep whatever fearful state or positive state you may earn through it. And then once you leave the dungeon, things have calmed down and you lose it. Right. So for example, I mean, and they're all not all negative, like the afflictions you earn. I mean, there are negative aspects, but I try to give them a positive spin because that's how it is in the game. So for example, if your character fails their resolve roll and they roll on this table and they become, let's say, fearful, they're scared now. They're scared of being in a dungeon. So they do -2 damage from being, in the state that they're in. They don't have the resolve to go through what they're doing. But on the flip side, their initiative is eased too. They're trying to get things done with as fast as they can. They're speedy. They just want to get out. Yeah, it's all things of that nature as far as the afflictions and virtues go, which is what the positive ones are called. They're both, again, it's pretty cool stuff.
Now, real quick, Al, too, because we were talking about this. You're inspired by this, video game, Darkest Dungeon. Overall, before you go any further about like the breakdown, what is your goal at the end of the day? What's the goal of this particular setting and what you're trying to develop within the setting?
Well, my real goal is to try to make it feel as close to Darkest Dungeon as I could via the Cypher System rules. So I just try to emulate, or I guess mimic, the mechanics found within. And due to the nature of Cypher System, it's pretty easy. All you really have to do is assign difficulty numbers to certain tasks, and bing, bang, boom. That's an added mechanic. Like you can call it what you will, but it's pretty easy to do that stuff. Not easy, but that's my goal. And on top of that, because Darkest Dungeon, again, it's more of like it's a video game with no roleplay aspects, right? So you're just going basically into the dungeon to fight stuff, into town to heal, into the dungeon to fight stuff, back and forth, whatever, right? That could become very monotonous in a Cypher System or any role playing game, honestly. Right. But something I'm gonna create myself is some sort of struggles or conflicts that could be found within the town itself to kind of promote that role playing. Maybe the players will need to acquire supplies from a band of, it might be lawless in this town. I really haven't fully fleshed out the setting myself. Still working on it, work in progress. But these are just some ideas I've had. Like resources could be scarce and they're being hoarded by somebody. You might have to negotiate with them to get set supplies. They might not take money. Who knows? Right. You can have it so that maybe the leader of the town is corrupt and you need to find a way to oust him from power and get someone like the real, like maybe he's a false, king or whatever. There's so many things to play with within the town, and it could be basically, and if we're running this, it could be basically any like sort of social conflict you would find within a fantasy setting, and there's so many different things to play with in that scenario.
I have to say something else to you, because you've hit so many beautiful points, especially talking about the town itself and how the town is going to be integral to the motivations of the players. But you did something when I played, and I would never forget it. You gave interesting aspects to things encountered within the dungeon itself.
Okay. Before I touch on that though, what you had said before, fuck, I'm blanking again. What did you just say right before you started talking about the creatures?
Oh, the fact that the town would be motivating factors.
So yeah, this is a big point of what I'm trying to again before we go past my goal question. This is another thing I'm trying to achieve with this setting, or with the inspirational. Darkest Dungeon inspiration is a big aspect is building up the town. So you could play this game with a steady group of people, but what I'm aiming for is to sort of make it a Westmarch style play game, where some characters can build, or all the characters who play in the same town can work to build it up. you can upgrade your facilities, make them cheaper to use, improve the benefits, and then when new players come to the town, it'll be a little bit easier for them to get on level footing with the higher tier players, sort of making West Marches a little more balanced in that respect, because they'll have access to, again, depending on how far along the town has been upgraded, they'll be able to use facilities much cheaper than if they were there at the start of the town, or the benefits will be easier to acquire.
So in a lot of, so what you're saying is there's going to be community building aspects.
Exactly, but I haven't really quantified exactly how that's going to work out in this particular setting. In Darkest Dungeons, the game, you acquire relics throughout your diving, like art of like portraits or busts or books or whatever have you, and then you use those resources along with money to upgrade each facility. So odds are I will create a facsimile to these relics that you'll find in the dungeon. They'll just be part of the normal loot that you find, and once you have acquired enough and donated enough, you'll be able to upgrade these facilities, so that when let's say a new player decides to join the group and it's already a pre-established town, the blacksmith may be level 2 for them, and they'll be able to use those benefits instead of it being level 1 for them. And they'll still be able to be on not even level field, and not that that matters too much in Cypher System anyway, but the power gap won't be as huge.
The power,
If that makes sense.
Well, that's probably one of the coolest portions. But what I was saying is, you should take inspiration from what you said. And like I said, what you had done in some of the things in the dungeons with some of the encounters, there were certain actual role playing opportunities. So you could actually take story elements and build those into the dungeon based on what's going on in the city. For example, what if like you were saying, the guy who's hoarding all the resources. Well, let's just say he's got a child that got lost in the dungeon or something. And his deal is, what, bring me proof of her life or death, and you can do so and so. So these are role playing aspects. And then of course, if the little girl is down there, maybe she's some sort of undead creature now, or she could be she could become the host of something horrible, just so many aspects to add in those play elements that make Cypher so cool.
Yeah, exactly, and again, because I'm drawing inspiration from a video game, doesn't mean when you're GMing a dungeon dive, it has to play out exactly like what it is in a video game. Like Dean said, you can throw roleplay elements in there however you see fit. I believe in your game, I think it was the one you played, and I forget, I added in an NPC that was already in the dungeon searching for loot.
Yep,
and you guys decided to trust him, and he ended up stealing some of the treasure at the end.
Yep.
And again, they had to interact with him. They had to decide whether to trust him or not. And then they had to, work with him going forward. And that was a fun thing to introduce into the dungeon. And you don't see little things like that within Darkest Dungeon. I mean, there are random encounters and such, but it's more battles than anything. It's not really any, character interactions.
Well, once again, like we always say, if you take any video game, no matter, what it's trying to accomplish, it's still linear. It's still very linear. That it does not have a lot of opportunity to veer left or veer right, or crawl up underneath the thing. You know what, you've got to go down that path. And most video games in a lot of respects turn into a grind, depending on especially if it's supposed to be a fantasy RPG or something like that, Diablo, Darkest Dungeon, the list goes on and on, where this will never be a grind. This will be whatever you make it. I mean, you could turn it into a grind, of course, but like we said before, that can be monotonous.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's again the beautiful nature of Cypher System is you can inject almost any idea into any setting, and it becomes very, like, it almost feels what is seamless. Like it just all plays out so well, even though it might not have necessarily happened or could happen in the source material. The fact that you're playing Cypher System, you could the reins are loose. Like you can do whatever you want,
Exactly.
and it ends up being super fun. Another thing I want to touch on before we go too far ahead is the torch mechanics of the game, right? So that's a really big aspect of Darkest Dungeon is while you explore the dungeon, what you call it,
you have light.
yeah,
You need light.
the light source can go. It does go down over time if you don't continually replenish fire to the flame. So as the light levels change or whatever have you, there's different buffs and negatives that come with that. So managing your light source also becomes part of the game. Whether you want to keep the light low for high chances of getting good rewards, but also the monsters now have a higher chance to crit you and do more damage. So there's a lot of give and take with that because it'd be easy enough to keep the torch all the way up, but there's a certain fun that comes with that risk of keeping the torch low. And again, if the players are feeling risky, they can keep it low. If they're feeling scared or whatever, have you want to be on a safer side, they can keep it high for those defensive buffs and making it easier to like actually explore the dungeon. But the cool aspect about how I've dealt with managing the torch system, because there's many ways you can go about keeping track of time in Cypher System or in any setting, right? But the way I found easiest was while you're exploring a dungeon, each tunnel or whatever corridor, each hallway will have a certain length. You can decide as a GM how long you want it to be. I make them as long as you give them sections, right? We'll give them like maybe anywhere between 1 to 5 sections, and that like 5 sections is a super long hallway, 1 section is a short hallway, whatever, right? And each section they pass through counts as 1 tick on the torch. After 4 ticks, the torch goes down a level. So as a GM, you'll have to do a little bit of a bookkeeping to keep track of where the torch is, but what's easy is just you keep a die handy, a D4. It's like, hey, if they've done this many turns, torch goes down. I'll probably write something that'll be included in the material that, be a little cutout you can have, or a card or something. But again, I feel like that's going to be a super fun way to make the dungeon delving a little more immersive as in regards to Darkest Dungeon. You'll definitely have that impact of the light levels impacting what you're able to do in the dungeon. And the reason I brought that up or wanted to bring it up is, let's say you don't want to play Darkest Dungeon, but you are looking for that dungeon crawl feel in Cypher System. This will be a perfect way to do that. Like, from what I've been told by my players, they felt like they were in a dungeon crawl, in a dungeon, like actually crawling through the hallways, dodging traps, whatever have you. I mean, Dean can speak to it.
I can attest to that. And I'll say it like this. There is an intensity to playing this particular role-playing setting. This Cypher System setting that Ancient Albatross has put together. There is an intensity that is it's almost visceral, and it's really cool because you get into it, and it's funny. We were playing the one time we were playing, and everybody's like, "Wait, no, what? Turn the light up, no, turn it down." You were really pulling teeth, and it was awesome. And it was only like a 2-hour run that we did, but it was really awesome. It brought to the forefront these cool emotions, and you felt good. It was never like fear of death or anything like that. It was just, what's gonna happen? Oh my God, what's beyond my line of sight? What's in the darkness? So excellent job. And I think the more you work on it out, the more you flesh it out, the better it's the more it's going to be just that. Yes, dungeon crawl, awesome. The stress and the fear factors and stuff, perfect horror aspects, which is crazy because he never even used actually horror mode on us to increase those, but we felt like we were in a horror mode as it got darker.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the goal with the torch system. It's kind of a pseudo horror mode, if that makes sense, because the rules change as the torch levels go. I could whip it out right now. I think I wrote down the torch rules. 1 sec. I did have them before, but I kind of adjusted them a little. Like for example, when the torch is at its highest level at 5, I forget what it's called, like bright or whatever. Like each level will have a name. But at torch level 5, at the highest level, initiative is ease 2, scouting the hallways is ease 2. You have no extra stress on you because you can clearly see. It's really easy to avoid stress while just walking through the dungeon. And it's harder for monsters to crit you. They only crit you on a 1. But as the light level goes down, things get a little tougher. So let's look at level 1, the darkest it could be. No bonus to initiative, no bonus to scouting. You do, however, add +3 to your attack rolls to emulate getting crits. This is not an asset. This is an actual +3 to encourage players to go for that 20. Because at this level, things get really dangerous, so it's kind of a benefit. In the rules of Darkest Dungeon, players can also crit more at this level. I wanted to emulate that this way. The actual numbers might change, but that's the goal. And also, at this level, it's treasure rolls are ease 3. Makes it super easy to find rare loot. But each time you encounter stress, you get an extra +3 stress. Things are very stressful at this level. And it becomes much harder to avoid stress while walking through the dungeon, and it also becomes harder to avoid random monsters in the dungeon because you can't see.
Basically, he makes you extremely paranoid.
Yeah, yeah.
We ran around at level 1 darkness for a little while, and we were like jumping over to everything. You'd hear Al played it up really nice. He set a lot of atmosphere with, sounds and stuff like that. So the littlest sound had people, what is that? Something moved. You can't see in front of you anyway, but, something did move. I saw it.
And on top of that, the monsters are also stronger at these levels, at the lower levels. So when you go to dodge a monster's attack, it's 2 steps harder. A monster can now crit you on a 5. That's like that horror mode type aspect. Now monsters can crit. You don't get a GM intrusion on a 5, but monsters can crit you and do extra damage on a 5. Like if you roll the 5 to defend against their attack.
Right.
And they do 3 more damage, so much more deadly at these higher levels. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for with this, is to emulate that, you could die at any moment in Darkest Dungeon. Like, you could be doing super well, but once you start being like cocky and you can take those risks and get to low levels, 1 crit could take you out like that. Like your character's just dead. But I'm also go on.
I was just gonna say, to give people an idea, the most heinous and malicious things hang out in the darkest places in the dungeon. So that's kind of what what you start to understand. The creatures that will come into the light, or the creatures that you catch in the light, are not nearly as nasty as that which has embraced the darkness.
Exactly.
So that's kind of why in the dark, you encounter the worst things, the most heinous of creations. It's so, I mean, it's just great. I'm a fan. I'm a fanboy.
But just to go back a little bit, when I say you die in Darkest Dungeon, they added a mechanic where I believe when the game first came out, I could be wrong on this. I might be misremembering, but I think as soon as you hit 0 HP, your character died. That was it. But they added something, or it might have been in the game the whole time, and I'm misremembering. But they added something called being at death's door. So when all your pulls are at 0, or if your character has 0 health in Darkest Dungeon, you will be at death's door. And the next time you get hit could be the last time. You will have to make a death blow save. If you fail, you die. If you succeed, you cling to life. And it's a mechanic from the game, and I feel like it's an elegant way to still keep people in the game, even if they're about to die, and give them that chance to rethink a defensive strategy. And it's super easy in Cypher System to include it because, hey, like I said earlier, you just have to say what, a difficulty number is and what you're trying to save against, and boom, that's a new mechanic. So let's say, I haven't decided a difficulty number for it, but let's say a death blow save is a difficulty 6. That's it. Boom. Difficulty 6 death. Now death blow is a mechanic. And what triggers it is being at 0 health and getting hit. And again, and that's why I love Cypher System. It's so elegant to transfer over these ideas and have them work seamlessly like they did in the the source material.
Yeah, that is true. That's
Um,
true.
but yeah, I think I've exhausted all the stuff I've gotten so far. I do have a long list of things I'm planning to work on, such as a custom foci, one for each of the characters in the game. Hopefully, that might be quite a stretch. I think there's 21 characters, something along those lines. So we'll
I'll
see.
help you.
What is it? Creating custom trinkets, which are items you can hold in Darkest Dungeon, which just give you a passive buff. I'm just gonna follow Darkest Dungeon's footsteps and allow characters to hold 2 of them. I just have to.
Asset deck.
What happened?
It's a new asset deck. It's an
Yeah,
asset deck
exactly. So,
for Darkest Dungeon.
yeah, exactly. So it'll be something similar to that. Just hey, here's a relic that gives you this bonus. Whatever, hold it. You can hold 2 at a time. It's a trinket. Either way, also some custom ciphers, hopefully, and also some custom artifacts, hopefully. Also, got to go through and create some of the NPCs, creatures, so on and so forth, and develop the city lore a little bit more. Um, and yeah, I think that's about it. I got a lot of ideas, but it's a little too much to really go to a full dive.
Nice.
But Dean, so I think that leaves us with you. So tell us a little bit about your horror supplement.
Well, this has been a long gestating project for me as it was because I actually started developing this over probably over a year ago, maybe a year and a half. And what I did was I had actually created this as a group of flavors, and they were flavors specific to typical horror tropes. What you find within those type of tropes. So the idea of like the monster with a soul, or the idea of the chosen ones. You know how you always have the group there, the librarians, the scholars. All of those type things. That the of course the monster hunter. Stuff like the TV show Supernatural. So I was building the idea to be able to build Sam and Dean Winchester. The hunters that they had through there. Um, Another inspiration was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So if you wanted to build, a chosen one. Another TV show that was an inspiration was Grimm. So if you wanted to, build, a Grimm, I call those guys like harbingers. All those things that were so cool. And the other thing was that I wanted to kind of throw it to a noir type setting. I ran a few play tests with it where I was set in the 1920s. I did another one set in the 1950s. Um, Ran beautifully, but I never completed it. I kept, getting sidetracked or whatever. So what ended up happening was, of course, Sean K. Reynolds put out Stay Alive, and I was floored. I read the book, from cover to cover twice in one night, and I realized I needed to finish the supplement because it would just fit.
So real quick, I know Stay Alive was the catalyst that drove you to finish it. What was the initial spark of inspiration to start it? Like, was there some media or something, or just
Yeah, actually, what happened was I was sitting and I was watching Dark City. I don't know if you know the movie, but it's a great movie. It's a noir, dark fantasy type thing. Where these aliens basically have a world, um, a, a fake world that they can reset and control. And it was just that. And then I of course was watching Grimm, and I was like, this stuff would be great in Cypher. And then I realized it wasn't there yet. You know, we didn't have Stay Alive. Stay Alive wasn't even on the horizon when I first started this. Like I said, this was built as a book of flavors, and um, yeah, I just um, sat down and started writing, and realized that you know one of the cool parts about Cypher, like where Al was talking about how mechanics work, for me, it was the idea of how abilities worked, and what aspects did you want to bring to the table when you were creating those type of abilities, those type of characters. And, I gave them, flashy names, the abilities, like, there's like one called Fighting a Dog, which, you know, where you basically it's about how tenacious you are, how what aspect drives you, things like that. Um, of course, the new CSR came out, so it made me rethink my approach. And then Stay Alive came out, and that was, like you said, the catalyst to finish it. So what I did was I actually went back in, I exploded everything into its component parts. So now it's just a list of low tier, mid tier, high tier abilities. And I get put examples, of course, of different characters, to let people see how you can build whatever you want as far as using these abilities. And you can swap these abilities just like you would normally do flavors, but this is just another list of abilities that we added to the ones that are in the Cypher System rulebook or in the horror rulebook when you start looking at horror aspects. Um, the other thing I did, inspired by Sean K. Reynolds, was that I did a treatment for werewolves as well. So werewolves, like the vampires or anything else, this becomes another descriptor. So you're not necessarily a werewolf, you're just a metamorphic creature.
So let me ask you a quick question about the werewolves, how you handled it.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes a werewolf in your supplement, and also, um, how is it different from like Howls at the Moon, the foci?
Well, that's let me go to the page. Here we go. Um, Basically, what I did was shapeshifters, skinwalkers, changelings, and all the other myriad terms given to those who change from man to beast. You know, the Titanus metamorph, or just a metamorph, as we refer to them throughout the document. What I did was I set up like how in Stay Alive there are attributes that specifically fall to a um, a vampire. This is what I did. I gave specific attributes that every metamorphic creature, every whether you're a bear, tiger, whatever, you get a set of abilities there, and then there's basically what I did was I used the idea that the basic auspice of the moon, for crescent moon, full moon, half moon, and new moon. Those four aspects. You can pick abilities from under those, and those will give you your metamorphic abilities. So, just to give you an idea, one of the fundamental powers or abilities, standard ability that every metamorph will get is Primal Attraction. So, what that says, you're a bastion of life. Perhaps your connection to the more primordial portions of the brain. Perhaps it's a supernatural connection to life itself. None can say. But what can be said is you are a fount of life. Your skin is smoother. Your hair has more sheen and vibrancy. Your flesh is warm and refreshing if your rare type is mammalian. Cool and silky if you're reptilian or avian. Now, what this does is it says you're alluring, intriguing, and inviting. This isn't enough to give you a bonus on social interaction, but people almost always start out in an amicable way to you. It's an enabler. So that's, an ability that anybody who is metamorphic in nature, they get that naturally.
I dig it.
You know,
Real quick, you mentioned that you can pick, a phase of the moon to have different set of abilities or powers, right?
mm-hmm.
So does that mean they can only transform when it's those
No,
kind of moons?
no.
What can trigger the transformation in this?
Okay, what happens is this: every aspect of the moon, whichever aspect of the moon you choose, has a stronger draw on you at that time of the month.
Okay.
So you're more drawn, more prone to changing, but you do have control over your change. That's part of the thing. I didn't want to, how's it the moon? I love the focus, but I hate the focus all at the same time. Because just starting out, so only 28 days out of the month, not even 28 days, what is it, 7 days out of the month, you have an ability,
Yeah.
but for the rest of the time in the month, you don't, So I kind of wanted to do away with that. Um, you know, so, that's what I did, so, like the crescent moon, I'll give you a quick example. Like the crescent moon says, let's do the new moon. That's something different.
Okay.
Where creatures born under the auspice of the new moon are sometimes thought to be weaker than those of others born under other phases. This cannot be further from the truth. Shadows, as many people call them, suffer from a major loss. Don't suffer the major loss of humanity. Yes, they may not end up possessing the same physical benefits as their cousins, but what they lack in physicality, they more than make up for it in mental skills and versatility. And unlike their cousins who might lose their humanity once a month, you know, they are more prone and are more prone to killing sprees. They don't go through that. So first off, shadows don't transform on the same level as others. Usually during the new moon phase, they will gain 20 pounds of compact muscle. Their hair becomes a bit unruly. Their eyebrows may thicken. If they have facial hair, it thickens. Other than that, they still look pretty much like themselves. They find that their teeth become slightly more pronounced, as well as hardening of the nails. Shadows are also not the best at social interactions when transformed. All social interactions and mental activities are hindered during that time.
Makes
You are
sense.
also born with the ability to control all transformations after your first uncontrolled change. Also, unlike your cousins, you are not subject to the uncontrollable change once a month during your auspice. So they don't have to worry about it at all. Whereas those under the crescent moon can change whenever they want, but under the crescent moon, they might be prone as a GM intrusion,
To accidentally
uh,
change.
right, to accidentally change. You know, so those
That's
those little quirks, little clicks.
that's actually friggin' awesome. You need to run a werewolf game now.
Well, here's the cool part about it: you can run in the way I've kind of built the world itself. Those are aspects that are there. Like some of the seeds in here are that there's two cities in the world, one west and one here in the east. Actually, what used to be Detroit is now a walled city, and basically, there's an underlying story there that um, the government actually did an experiment, and it's like a messed up kind of zombie town, you know. Um, and then there's a over, across the pond, in the eastern portion of the world, there's a city that is basically overrun with supernatural creatures, basically ruled by vampires. You know, so there's stuff in there. And my thought process, I didn't even do anything different or new with vampires because I'm looking at stay alive,
Vampires.
populate them with those kind of vampires. You know what I'm saying? And there's so many little aspects that you can play with now, and bring the two worlds together.
And what else did you include in the supplement? So you have flavors. You have the setting seeds.
Yep.
Did you include foci, descriptors?
Well, what I did was I left it open. Here, let me go. What I did was I actually showed you, I actually created a foci using this here. Let me go. Where is it? I think it's in one of my sidebars. Um,
But yeah.
okay, here, real quick. What I threw in the sidebars were little things like that, like I threw in some new, some baseline thugs. You know, there's Rad. He's level 4. He's a wolf man, 20 health. Nothing special about him. But then there was like Corin is a wizard. He uses magic, and he has a hypnosis spell and a fire blast spell. So throwing those things in there. As far as a focus, there, where did I? Oh, here it is. I created a focus. Dread is a vicious warrior who is a monster with a soul. So I literally used these abilities to create um, a monster with a soul.
Cool.
from
So there are pre-gens then.
right. There's some pre-gens in here,
Good.
you know. And so what you see is if you look at the character, he has a might of 20, intellect 8, um, speed 10, might edge 1. Now his skills, and these come from the abilities that are in here. He's bloodthirsty. He's a berserker, tracking, bash, no need for weapons, quick draw, trained without armor. You know, and there's an ability called Monster Boost.
Yeah.
You know, so all these little things will come into play. Like I said, I could go through and like here. Let me pull up bloodthirsty for you real quick, and it'll give you an idea of what this ability is. Abilities this way. I'm still getting used to this whole thing myself.
But that's the beautiful thing about Cypher System is that it's so easy to just give a name to something and add it as a descriptor or as an aspect of the character or an ability. Like it's just so easy to rework an idea to fit into Cypher System. So like Bloodthirsty, for example, like.
Okay, Bloodthirsty must be from one of the books because it's not mine. So,
oh my
that's
god!
funny. I thought that was one of mine. How about this though? But no, here's a good one. One of the things I put in for like being a monster hunter, I call there's an ability called Hawker's Mark. Hawker's Mark. You have the ability to mark your target. This makes them easier to track, identify, and deal with in general. Any attempts for the target, to make an escape, hide, deceive you in any way, is one step more difficult for that creature. And you can only put one mark on one creature at a time. Something like that. And then like one other cool ability that I had mentioned, I didn't mention it, but here, Inner Flames. The character gains a +1 edge in a pool of their choosing. This ability can be taken a total of 3 times. Each time a different edge can be increased. And that was like for the chosen ones. I think I put that for the idea or the concept. But see, now it's just a list of abilities that can be put into your game.
Exactly. So you can take any Cypher System character you make, swap out one or two of the abilities, and bing bang boom, you have a monster character or a character for the monster setting.
For a horror setting.
A horror monster. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Like because it's just right here in front of me. Mask of the Phantasm. You've become extremely adept at hiding or disguising yourself. You can hide from anyone or anything. Your disguises are almost flawless. Any attempt to hide from someone or something is altered one step in your favor. So that I use that, thought about that. The monster with a soul. We got the typical vampire. Like if in Stay Alive it says you have a pallor. So you have this undead look. So with this, you're adept at disguising yourself. You might throw in, hey, my character's a makeup artist. This is how you So it just makes it a little easier. They might just think you're, a fan of makeup. So that's kind of what this was all about. And what I think it came out pretty good. I think it's very much just a toolkit, another toolkit, a little mini toolkit to be added in, so you have setting seeds, you have character pre-gens, you have some villains, there's even some adventure. And there's an adventure seed, actually a little campaign seed. And where is it at? I think I was just looking at it.
I mean, it definitely sounds like you've captured the essence of that, horror monster, what is it, Buffy, what is it, supernatural
Buffy,
feeling.
supernatural.
It definitely feels like, or you captured that feeling and still keeping it, pretty easily Cypher.
Right. So what it is like what I did was I just put a real small seed for a 3-act adventure. The adventure is called The Truth. Act 1 is called The Dream. Act 2 is The Others. And Act 3 is Manifesting the Truth. And basically it's just a mini idea, where the player characters are drawn in for the first time for some reason. They're all experiencing a dream, a shared dream, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But there's this thing going on. So, if you get out here and you get it, these are all the things. I figured that this would be a full-on toolkit. Like I said, inspired by the way Stay Alive was done. I wanted to give you like kind of everything that you could want as a one-stop shop, to add to your game. And people, it's available out there on Drive Through RPG right now. It's 25 pages, so it's nice and beefy for me.
Well, we'll definitely be sure, like usual, to add the link to it down below. Unfortunately, there'll be no link for my, because it's still pen and paper in my mind. But yeah, we'll definitely include, Alpha Dean's or Dean's Drive Through RPG link for his product. What's the exact title of that again?
The Umbral Earth, a horror remix.
There we go. I'll have a link for that down below. Do you have any final thoughts, Dean, before I close this out?
No, actually, everybody, for those of you who are watching, thank you. Stay safe. Please, follow the rules. Wash your hands. Use that hand sanitizer if you got it. And you know what? Take care of each other. And all of us here at Cypher Unlimited, we're going to be all over the Discord page, all over the Facebook page. And if, any of us can do anything, from running the game to just being the ear to listen, reach out to us. We'll see what we can do. And there's all sorts of stuff going on with the community right now. We have several games and several people looking for groups and so on and so forth out there. So that's really my final thoughts. Hey, let's just take care of each other. Let's be safe. Let's get through this thing.
Yeah, most definitely want to echo that by saying, we as a community are, also family. So, we got to help each other through these trying times of what's going on with the world right now. And, it can be even something as simple as, an ear for venting or, just someone to talk to. We're all here for you. Reach out if you don't feel comfortable, like pinging me in general, DM me if you want to, whatever have you. But yeah, stay safe, stay sane, and if you can, try to run some games on the server, try to participate in some games, because that is definitely a way to kind of alleviate all the tension with what's going on right now. Yeah, it's definitely.
And just for everybody out there, just so you know what, we're all speaking from experience. One of the reasons why Anthony isn't with us tonight is stress. He's been deluged for the last for all this week. Al works in retail. Al's seeing it firsthand, seeing the crazy out there. I work at a major manufacturing facility, and just the hoops that we've had to jump through all week long are really out there.
Yeah. So. Again, it's definitely a trying time with all the changes that are happening, but we as a community got to stay strong with each other. So again, thank you all for being a part of this lovely community. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure, like usual, to like, share, subscribe, hit that little bell button to let you know when we post new videos, get notifications. And on top of that, be sure to comment. Let us know what you think about, Dean's supplement, about my Darkest Dungeon ideas. Maybe you have some better ideas you want to toss at me. Throw them in the comments. Yeah, it's been a pleasure as usual, Dean. And it's been a pleasure as usual, viewers at home. So, yeah, from us at the CU, we will see you later.